This video is part of a series of videos that I am publishing about my attending the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights briefing on language access for individuals with limited English proficiency. If you want to see all of the videos in this series, please go to this video's description down right below the video, and you should be able to find the links to the other videos as well as a link to a playlist that contains all of the videos. And so the last panel was lived experiences of individuals with limited English proficiency. This panel was supposed to have 4 speakers. After the briefing, I spoke with 2 of the commissioners, and they shared that 2 of the people who were slated to speak did not feel safe enough to come and give their testimony, which I think really highlights kind of the situation that we're in right now in the United States. I'm not going to say much more on that, but I wanted to share this testimony and encourage you to watch it on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights YouTube channel, which again, I will be providing that link in the comments. So the first person to speak was Jerry Rayburn, a UCLA student and Thai immigrant. He tells his mother's story relating to language access and that he came to this country at the age of 8. His mother grew up on a rice farm, and he and his sister were born in Bangkok. His youngest brother was born in California, and this is a quote, "The search for the American dream has been excruciatingly painful," end quote, for his family. His mother was always placed in temporary low-paid positions. They qualified for Medi-Cal, which is the California state version of Medicaid. The day before she was admitted to the ICU, his mother went to her primary care provider and communicated that she had some back pain, and the doctor just gave her some Tylenol and sent her home. It turns out she actually had kidney stones and went into sepsis. No language assistance was provided, and this was in 2016, and a code blue was called. Jerry didn't understand what was happening. Circulation was cut off to his mother's extremities. The doctors asked for consent to amputate her fingers, but she was provided no language assistance, so she had no informed consent. Jerry couldn't adequately help his mother linguistically and asked for an interpreter. The doctor didn't provide one and didn't know how to obtain one. He told Jerry that it was his responsibility to obtain one, not the doctor. No one in the hospital explained to his mother why the amputation was being performed. Him and his brother, they tried their best to explain it to her, and when his mother woke up and saw what was done, she fell into a deep depression. He wanted to use profanity to explain how traumatic this is for him and, of course, his mother, but he decided to refrain from using profanity despite how strongly he felt about it. His mother was in the ICU, and when they removed her endotracheal tube, he struggled to pronounce endotracheal. She lost her voice. He has no idea how informed consent was obtained for his mother. It took over 2 months for his mother to receive speech therapy, and that speech therapy was not culturally competent, and they treated his mother in a, quote, infantilizing way. So they treated her like a baby. Of course, she didn't have any interpretation. He says, had the hospital provided an interpreter, his mother's illness would not have been so prolonged and traumatic, that this all started with a primary care physician who could have relied upon an interpreter to detect her symptoms earlier. He says, and I quote, effective communication with patients in their preferred language, end quote, improves health outcomes. He talks about Executive Order 13166. He says, and I quote, language access can save lives and change health outcomes, end quote. For people like my mother, quote, my family's pursuit of the American dream has been a tragedy, end quote. And he ends by saying that he is neurodivergent and autistic, which just really, I ended up going to Jerry after this whole thing, and I thanked him for his testimony and his bravery. You know, I know everyone with autism is different, but I also recognize how much more difficult it can be to get up and speak to a panel of commissioners at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights in front of all these people. It just, oh my goodness, very powerful testimony. Next up, we had Zahra Rahimi, who is a William & Mary student and an Afghan immigrant. She moved to the U.S. 5 years ago, and as the eldest child, she became their default translator for her parents. She didn't speak much English, so she actually learned how to use Google Translate, which wasn't easy for her. There were lots of complicated words and official terms that she couldn't translate herself, and she would use Google Translate to help her, but it wouldn't really be sufficient. And that one document would take her over an hour to help people understand. Even with Google Translate, it wasn't accurate. And it left her and the people she was helping kind of second guessing if they really understood. She also talks about using Google Translate at the doctors, that her parents didn't really understand, that the doctor didn't really understand, and that it was very, very challenging to get a, quote, translator, which I imagine she meant interpreter. I think the people with limited English proficiency have far more of, a legitimate reason to use translator instead of interpreter, whereas, all due respect, but everyone at the commission should have accurately been able to differentiate between interpreter and translator. The commissioners and the subject matter experts, people with limited English proficiency aside. So she started working as a translator for people in Alexandria. She saw people having issues navigating scheduling systems and EHR systems, electronic health record management systems, because the user interfaces weren't in English, which is something I mentioned in another part of this video. She didn't just experience physical health issues, but also mental health issues in addition to the trauma that she already experienced. Being able to get support was so out of reach for them because they couldn't understand English, that mental health resources were only offered in English, or they were difficult to access, even if they were in Dari or Pashto. She claims that many people missed their immigration meetings and deadlines for essential benefits because of a lack of language assistance, that she has lots of difficulties obtaining support in school, and that many parents also experience the same difficulty with their children. Parents remain unaware of school policies, and that as a result, gaps in education grow. She actually started a tutoring service for Afghan students that double as English classes. She says, and I quote, "This has shown me how important professional translation services are," end quote, because we may not possess the skills to do so. Providing translators and interpreters can make a big difference in accessing essential services. Trained interpreters can make the difference between receiving healthcare services and not. And then it ended with questions from commissioners. The questions were limited, but this is where we ended with yet another dramatic moment with Adams, our best friend. Adams starts grilling Rahimi. Other than the United States, what countries offer language assistance? What other countries offer these services? A simple Google search reveals Ireland, England, Sweden, Canada, Wales and France, Norway. Did you know Australia, Germany, yes sirree, and don't forget New Zealand, all of the UK, but I think I left out Scotland. And Rahimi responds honestly, "I'm not aware. America is a diverse country. We have a lot of people coming from countries overseas." At that point, Garza speaks up, and Adams snaps back at Garza and says he feels like he's being constantly interrupted. He starts just randomly throwing out the names of countries at Rahimi, asking if she knows if those countries provide language assistance like the United States does. And if I recall correctly, he purposely mentioned a lot of countries that have far-right governments or are leaning that way now, which, far-right governments tend to criminalize immigration. So that was a super unfair question. So Garza kind of cuts Adams off and very delicately asks Rahimi instead to explain her program in more depth. And I write here, Kelly is shaking as she writes her notes. This was the point where I seriously almost yelled out at Adams. And they would have pulled me out of there.